In Mark 16, verse 6, when they got there, the angel told them, "He is risen, he is not here." So that does not move the account back at all. One verse that is commonly recited is Mark 16:9. Now when Jesus was risen, early the first day of the week. All right? He appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he had cast 7 devils. Did you hear how I said that? Let me say that again. Now when Jesus was risen early the first day of the week. Right? Let me try and say that properly. Now when Jesus was risen, early the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene. All right? Jesus was already risen, and early the first day of the week. All right? So it's not saying that Jesus was risen early the first day of the week. It's all a matter where you put the emphasis. Of course, the problem is that when this was written, there was no comma. They put commas in after. They didn't put chapters, and they didn't put the commas in. So, those who prefer to have a Sunday resurrection would put a comma where it would sound a little different, and put the comma there, it would sound like this. Now when Jesus was risen early the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene. But reading it so that it reconciles correctly with Matthew 28, because we know the verses can't contradict each other, it reads, now when Jesus was risen, early the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene. So he had already risen from the tomb, according to 28:1, and early the next day, the first day of the week, he made an appearance. And that is consistent with the account of Matthew. Luke also has an account, chapter 24, and it says, now upon the first day of the week, this is verse 1, very early in the morning they came unto the sepulchre, bringing the spices which they prepared, and certain others with them. And they found the stone rolled away from the sepulchre, and they entered in and found not the body of the Lord Jesus. Now, I just want to point out here that in Matthew's account, we speak of the two Marys. However, in this account, we speak of they and certain others with them. So the question arises, how many visits were made to the sepulchre, and which people visited each time? If you take into account that this appears to have different people with them, it appears then to be a different visit. In any event, it does not contradict Matthew 28:1. In Luke 24:7, the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful man and be crucified, and the third day rise again. Now, Jesus was crucified correctly as the Paschal Lamb, as brought out in the other message. He was buried Wednesday evening before the high Sabbath of Thursday, and therefore, to rise the third day, a literal 3 times 24-hour periods, he rose on the eve, the very end of the Sabbath. Now we see in 24:9, and returned from the sepulchre and told all these things unto the 11 and to all the rest. It was Mary Magdalene and Joanna and Mary the mother of James and other women that were with him, which told these things unto the apostles. So there's a record of some of the visitors. Then arose Peter in verse 12 and ran unto the sepulchre, and stooping down he beheld the linen clothes laid by themselves, and departed, wondering in themselves at that which was come to pass. So we see here a third visit. to the sepulchre when Peter went there after he'd been told by the two Marys. Another account is in John chapter 20. It says, "The first day of the week cometh, Mary Magdalene early, when it was yet dark, unto the sepulchre, and seeth the stone taken away from the sepulchre." Well, that totally reconciles with Matthew 28:1. "Then she runneth and cometh to Simon Peter, and to the other disciple, whom Jesus loved." Verse 3, "Peter therefore went forth, and that other disciple, and came to the sepulchre." So we see another visit there. "So they ran both together, and the other disciple did outrun Peter, and came first to the sepulchre. And he stooped, looking down, and looking in, saw the linen clothes." And then in verse 10 we see that the disciples went away again unto their own home. But Mary stood without at the sepulchre weeping, and as she wept, she stooped down and looked into the sepulchre, and seeth two angels in white sitting, the one at the head and the other at the feet, where the body of Jesus had lain. Well, isn't that interesting? After the third visit now, when the disciples had been there, specifically Peter and the other one that Jesus loved, Mary is still sitting at the sepulchre weeping and has a vision of two angels. So this is after the angel that had rolled away the stone. Much later. And I don't know, she still seems to be in this state of astonishment, fear. They say unto her, "Woman, why weepest thou?" She saith unto them, "Because they have taken away my Lord, and I know not where they have laid him." And when she had thus said, she turned herself back and saw Jesus standing, and knew not that it was Jesus. And in verse 17, Jesus said to her, "Touch me not, for I am not yet ascended to my Father." So she's not allowed to touch him. Yet, back in the other verses, we saw when Jesus met them on the road, they fell down and worshiped, touching his feet. So obviously that was a different incident. After he had already risen to the Father and come back down, they were able to touch his feet when they worshipped him. But here in this vision, Jesus had not yet ascended to the Father. So we see many, many different events occurring that night. It was actually a very busy night. And there was multiple visits by different people. There was more than one occurrence with angels. But the bottom line is that Jesus had already risen before the end of the Sabbath. He did not rise on the first day of the week. And the scriptures, all the different accounts in the four Gospels, do not contradict each other at all, but simply give you a separate insight from each Gospel. John 19:42, there laid they Jesus, therefore, because of the Jews' preparation day, for the sepulchre was nigh at hand. And again, speaking of that high day Passover that had occurred. Much discussion can take place on this, but there's a lot of records of how the church observed and continued to observe the Sabbath for years and years after. And it was not until much later that the idea of Sunday worship came in. Sunday worship was always observed in the pagan realm, where they worshiped the sun. It was the venerable day of the sun.